Decade-long betrayal by my wife triggered a midlife crisis, causing me to confront my lost dreams and missed opportunities. I'm a 46-year-old banker, and I've spent my entire life moving in the exact opposite direction of my dreams. All the wild ambitions and passions that made me feel alive, they're just gone now. Instead, I'm locked in a 9-to-7 job, 6 days a week, and I've been at it for 26 long years. Every single time a crossroads appeared, I picked the safer path. I thought it would protect me. Instead, it robbed me of everything I knew I could become. Today, it all finally hit me. My wife confessed she's been cheating on me for the last 10 years. 10 years. My son looks at me with cold indifference, as if nothing I do or say even matters. And now I find myself crying not for the end of my marriage, not even for love lost, but because I realized I missed my father's funeral for nothing, not for some high purpose, not for a life worth living. I never finished my novel, never traveled the world, never helped the homeless the way I swore I would when I was young. All those things I thought made me who I was supposed to be, they've evaporated. If the man I was at 20 could see me now, I swear he would punch me in the face. I remember exactly who I was back then, 20 years old, on fire with purpose, certain I would change the world. People loved me, and I loved people right back. I was creative, spontaneous, bursting with energy, always the risk taker. I had 2 dreams back then. One was to write a novel, a strange utopic/dystopic story that would shake people awake, make them see the world through the bad and twisted eyes, and realize that nobody thinks their own actions are evil. I got 70 pages in by the time I turned 20. Here I am, 26 years later, still stuck on page 70. My other dream was to travel the world, help the poor and homeless. By then, I'd already backpacked through New Zealand and the Philippines. I had epic plans, all of Asia, Europe, America. For reference, I grew up in Australia, so all of that felt thrilling and bold. But I only made it as far as New Zealand and the Philippines. My grand adventure ended before it really began. So where did it all go off the rails? I was the only child. There was pressure to be responsible, to step into a stable life. I grabbed the graduate banking job, thinking I could write my book and travel later. Somehow, that job became my entire reason for being. My days bled together, come home for dinner, prep for yet another day at the bank, asleep by 10, up by 6, repeat for decades. My wife and I haven't made love in years, I can't even remember the last time. Maybe that's why, when she confessed to a decade of cheating yesterday, I barely felt anything except emptiness. She told me I'd changed, that I wasn't the man she married. And she's right. Who have I been for these 10 years? Not a husband, not myself. I didn't scream or cry or even ask for a divorce. I just felt that same numbness washing over me. But now, as I sit and let it all sink in, I finally feel a tear slip down, not for her, but for the man I used to be, the man I've buried beneath this shell of routine and duty. What happened to that fearless, wild-eyed kid? The one who would turn down the most popular girl in school out of loyalty to the woman I thought was the one? I always stayed on the straight path, loyal to the very end, never explored, never gambled much more than my time away for the sake of a paycheck. Remember those adventures I had, the backpacking, the writing? That all happened before my real life started. Once I settled into work, everything changed. The only adventure I have these days is saving pennies, penny pinching every expense. I can't remember the last time I did something fun, just for myself. In truth, I don't even know what I want anymore. My father died 10 years ago while I was clawing desperately at the next promotion. Mom called me again and again as his health faded, begging me to come visit one last time. But I was too busy to see him. I kept telling myself he'd hold on, that the job mattered, for both our sakes. He died, and I celebrated my big promotion alone. I hadn't seen him in 15 years. I consoled myself with cold, atheist logic, convincing myself the dead can't feel loss. What was I thinking? Always rationalizing away the important things in life, making excuses, putting it all off again and again till suddenly, there was nothing left worth putting off for. That's it, isn't it? Procrastination and excuses lead nowhere. I convinced myself that financial security was all that mattered. I look at myself now and realize how wrong I was. What's the use of money if you don't have yourself, your family, your dreams? I let my work devour me, turned into a robot, a provider, a stranger to my own wife and son. My unfinished novel mocks me, my unexplored world haunts my empty weekends. My son sees only an emotionless ATM, never a father. If you're young, please, just don't end up like me. Please don't let your wildness and your fire slip through your fingers because you're waiting for the right time. Don't make your whole life about work. Don't be a ghost around your friends and family. Don't let ambition rot inside you, unlived. Don't procrastinate, believing there's always more time. There isn't. If you have energy, passions, and people who matter, chase them. Hold on to them, before the routine gets its hooks in. Please do something now, before it's too late. Don't be the man I became. It must have been a moment much like the realization you're describing, except for my grandfather, it came when he was in his late 60s. He looked back and saw he had lost touch with his friends, his family, and really himself, over the course of almost 2 generations. But in these past 10 years, he's become such a huge and joyful presence in my family's life. I love him deeply, and I've long since forgiven him for those lost years. He's just too wonderful now not to love. I want to offer hope to anyone who feels they've lost their family or friends, or even themselves. If you open up to them again, you might be surprised by how much space they still have for you in their hearts. Go out and do all those things you've wished for: travel, play, explore, invent, write, build. Most importantly, love and forgive yourself. Thinking about my grandfather, I've often wondered what actually changed for him. I know he's been working on a memoir that he swears nobody will see until after he's gone. I suspect coming to terms with his own mortality had a pretty big effect, especially as his health started to fail. He has a pretty cynical sense of humor, but something about facing the end made him want to connect again. I think about that a lot, how it's never really too late for change. My dad's path was so similar, it's uncanny. In his early 30s, he threw himself into building a family, working the graveyard shift as an aviation mechanic for 17 years just to provide for us. Before that, he was wildly creative, writing short stories, even starting a few novels. But the job drained him, and over time, he slipped into a deep depression and became an intensely unhappy alcoholic. For the first 17 years of my life, I hated and feared him. He lived almost entirely in his basement bedroom, only surfacing for dinner, coming home angry and wasted after his shift in the early morning. His anger came out mostly on things, not people, but it was scary enough. I told myself I would never be anything like him. Then, when I turned 17, everything snapped. In the middle of the night, my dad called me sobbing. He was knee-deep in a river, telling me he was planning to drown himself. He said his biggest regret was being the reason I had to take medication to manage the same depression that plagued him, and that my memories of him would only ever be painful. I had no idea what to say, I only knew the worst of him, and in that moment I had to agree. He was drunk, so I put him on speakerphone, hoping he wouldn't notice. While I talked him down, my mom called the police, who managed to find him and pull him from the river. The next week, he sat our family down. He told us he was getting help, quitting the graveyard shift, and determined to fix his drinking and his life. It took time, but eventually the drinking tapered off to something manageable, and both his mood and our home calmed. The last 5 years with my father have been the best of my life, astonishing, really. He started writing again, and running marathons. His relationship with my mom is amazing. He now works overseas on aircraft in a 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off rotation, and when he's home, he and my mom travel to races around the world. He writes like a madman. He's 56 now, but has the energy and creativity you'd expect in someone half his age. That man truly started living at 51. We've traveled everywhere together, across Europe and the U.S., sharing wild adventures in strange cities, geeking out over records and music gear. Now that he's in control of his drinking, we enjoy bottles of wine and have contests to see who can write the funniest, or worst, poems when we're totally tipsy. Music is my thing. I play in bands, I tour when I can. It's all I want. Knowing what my dad went through, and seeing him turn everything around, made my parents so supportive of me. I don't think I'd have the confidence to chase my dreams without them. If my dad could turn it all around, you can too. You're never too old to make your dreams happen. Let me tell you about my mom's journey. My mom left my dad for another man when my dad was 40, and he spiraled into a massive depression. Suddenly, he was raising me, his 10-year-old daughter, on his own. He went through a sort of early midlife crisis. He quit his job, bounced between gigs, sometimes worried out loud that he'd fail at parenting or even just supporting us. I'd catch him crying in the middle of the night. Those months really sucked. But somehow, we got through them. He pulled himself together, landed a fantastic management job at a wholesale company, the kind of place where you can buy anything in bulk, and we could finally breathe a little bit. I graduated high school at 18, moved out of state for college, and that's when my dad, finally supporting just himself, really started living. He began traveling with his old fraternity brothers, hitting 7 countries and counting. They even started a travel blog, and loved scoring those super cheap airfare deals you hear about. He'd never been out of the country before, other than a cruise to the Bahamas. Now he's been to places like Angkor Moscow, Bangkok, Istanbul, Santorini, Athens, Barcelona. He even ran with the Bulls in Pamplona last year. This coming New Year's, he's heading to Milan, Prague, and Hanoi. He's 51 and finally experiencing the world. Everything is still possible, no matter your age. Keep your head up, because it's truly never too late. After everything, I'm determined to make changes for myself. I plan to cut back my work hours a lot. If I need to, I'll take a new job. I'm financially comfortable enough to make a transition. I'll have a real talk with my wife. I don't plan to divorce, but I hope improving our communication can help our relationship. If that doesn't work, then so be it. We'll both move on. I know some people would judge her harshly, but I don't see her that way. She's a genuinely good person, smart, empathetic, a wonderful sense of humor. I'm not saying what she did was right, but she's not evil. I really do know that. We were both at fault. Somewhere along the way, we let our communication fade, and with it, our relationship. There's so much more to being the head of a household than simply bringing home a paycheck. From this point forward, I'm determined to find a steady balance between emotional connection, love, and providing for my family. That's the life I want to live, and the example I want to set. When I look at my son, I realize the truth: I barely know him at all. I see him around dinner time, but can't recall the last genuine conversation we had. It's bizarre, even absurd, now that I truly think about it. I've unknowingly created distance between us. The thing is, I'm not even sure how to start reconnecting. I feel like I've become quite a boring person. But I'm resolved to change that. I refuse to be a poor role model. He deserves better. He deserves a father who is present. I'm going to make sure he doesn't repeat my mistakes when it comes to family. I've made up my mind: from now on, I'm going to be there for his basketball and rugby games on Saturdays. Work used to keep me away, but I won't let that be an excuse anymore. Maybe I'll even pick up a controller and play video games with him. There was a time I had a collection of SNES games, and I remember being surprisingly good at them. Who knows? Maybe I'll finally connect with my son through the things he loves. Speaking of passions, as for that old novel I always dreamt about, and my wanderlust, I have to face the reality that I've changed. The creativity I had in my youth has faded, and when I unearthed the 70 pages I'd written years ago, they didn't even feel like my own. I've changed so much in these 26 years. It might disappoint some to hear, but I doubt I'll ever complete that book. Still, I look forward to reading the stories of all those new, aspiring writers out there. I admire the passion. Travel, though, I might still pursue. Family trips during school holidays, trips with my wife every now and again, if she'll have me. I can't go back and see my father one last time, but my mother is still alive. She lives in London, and visiting her isn't easy, but I'll make it happen. I love my parents, and only wish I hadn't sidelined them as much as I did. As for the advice I've offered, my views haven't changed. Live your life. Don't let procrastination and lethargy steal it away. But I'd add this: try not to live in poverty if you can help it. I've been lucky enough never to have faced true hunger or homelessness, and I can only imagine how pursuing your dreams and happiness would be infinitely more difficult without those basic needs met. For those whose dream is financial stability, I say that's as noble a dream as any. We're all different, each of us missing different pieces in our lives. If you're honest with yourself, you'll know what you truly need. There's been some back and forth about language and education, uni versus college. Here in Australia, we generally call it university. For those who are curious, my education was free when I attended, and even today, Australians can study now and pay their fees afterward. I hope that clears up any confusion. I think I've covered the most important questions. And to close, I thank each and every one who's reached out, who's shown kindness. I wish only the best for those navigating difficult roads. I have absolute faith in your ability to change, to find happiness, to help yourselves, because in the end, you're the one best positioned to do it. Update 1. I never expected to be writing another update, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The last few months have been complicated, to say the least. I followed through on my promise to cut back work hours. Took a voluntary demotion, actually, went from senior manager back to regular banking officer. The pay cut stung initially, but for the first time in decades, I was home before 6 p.m. most days. My colleagues thought I'd lost my mind, but honestly, I felt more sane than I had in years. The real shock came 2 weeks after my last post. Sarah, my wife, came to me crying. Not the kind of tears I'd seen when she confessed the affair, but something deeper. Desperate. She was pregnant. At first, I assumed the worst. 10 years of cheating, and now this? But then she showed me the dates, the doctor's notes. The timing was impossible. It had been nearly 8 months since we'd been intimate, and she was only 6 weeks along. The math was simple, brutal. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I held her while she sobbed. Not because I'd forgiven everything, not because I was ready to play happy family, but because in that moment, she wasn't my cheating wife, she was just a terrified woman carrying a child that neither of us had planned for. The father? A colleague from her marketing firm, married himself, with twins at home. When she told him about the pregnancy, he transferred departments and blocked her number. Just like that, gone. She'd already ended things with him before telling me, apparently, but the pregnancy complicated everything. Here's where it gets strange. Instead of anger, I felt relief? For the first time in months, we were talking. Really talking. Not about bills or schedules or my mother's upcoming visit, but about life. About what we wanted, about who we'd become. We've started seeing a counselor. Dr. Martinez is this no-nonsense woman in her 60s who doesn't let us hide behind politeness or blame. 3 sessions in, and Sarah admitted something that floored me: she'd started the affair because she felt invisible. Not just sexually, but completely. She said living with me was like being married to a ghost. I wanted to defend myself, but I couldn't. She was right. The pregnancy is progressing normally. We haven't decided what we're doing yet, about us, about the baby, about anything really. But for now, we're trying. Not to save our marriage necessarily, but to figure out if there's anything left worth saving. My son James has been the biggest surprise. When I started showing up to his rugby matches, he was suspicious at first. Kept asking if I was sick or if work was firing me. But last Saturday, after his team won their semi-final, he hugged me, a real hug, Not one of those awkward shoulder pats. He whispered, "Thanks for coming, Dad," and I nearly lost it right there on the sideline. We've been playing those old SNES games I mentioned. Turns out I'm absolutely terrible at them now, but James finds my incompetence hilarious. Who knew failure could bring people closer? The novel pages are still sitting in my drawer. Untouched. But I've started something new, just observations, really. Notes about this strange season of my life. Nothing grand or world-changing, just honest. Maybe it'll become something, maybe it won't. For the first time, that doesn't terrify me. My mother's visit is next month. I haven't told her about Sarah's pregnancy yet, or about the state of our marriage. Some conversations are better had face to face. I won't pretend everything is perfect or that I've got it all figured out. Most days I still feel like I'm stumbling around in the dark. But I'm not numb anymore. The pain is sharp sometimes, but it's real. It's mine. And somehow, that feels like progress. The strangest part? I keep thinking about that 20-year-old version of myself. The one I thought would punch me in the face. I wonder what he'd make of all this mess. Maybe he'd be disappointed that I didn't have the perfect adventure he dreamed of. But maybe, just maybe, he'd understand that sometimes the most important journey is finding your way back to the people you love, even when the path is nothing like what you planned. We'll see what happens next. For the first time in years, I genuinely don't know, and that's both terrifying and exhilarating. Update 2. I'm writing this at 3 a.m., hands still shaking, because I don't know where else to turn. The last month has been a masterclass in how quickly life can implode, even when you think you're finally getting it together. Mom's visit went sideways in ways I couldn't have imagined. She arrived last Thursday, all smiles and stories about her garden in London, completely unaware of the soap opera her son's life had become. Sarah and I had agreed to wait until the weekend to tell her about the pregnancy. We wanted to present a united front, whatever that meant for us. Friday night, we're all having dinner when Mom casually mentions running into Trevor Walsh at the grocery store. Trevor Walsh. My old university mate who now works in marketing downtown, the same industry as Sarah's lover. Small world, right? Except Mom goes on to say how Trevor mentioned seeing Sarah around the office building quite a bit lately, how nice it was that she'd moved up in the world to work for such a prestigious firm. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah went pale, then red, then started stammering about how she sometimes had meetings there. But Mom, bless her detective instincts, pressed on. Apparently Trevor had seen Sarah leaving the building at odd hours, sometimes quite emotional, always with that handsome fellow from the 5th floor. I watched my wife crumble in real time. Mom, finally sensing she'd stepped in something, went quiet. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom and didn't come back for 20 minutes. When she did, her eyes were red and she looked like she'd aged 5 years. That's when it all came out. Not just the affair, the whole twisted timeline. The pregnancy wasn't from a random slip-up 6 weeks ago. Sarah had been lying about the dates, about everything. She was nearly 4 months along, not 6 weeks. The affair had been going on for 10 years, yes, but it hadn't been with one person. There had been others. The married colleague was just the latest. Mom sat there, fork halfway to her mouth, looking like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. I felt that familiar numbness creeping back in, but this time it was different, sharper, angrier. The baby could be anyone's. Sarah broke down completely, sobbing that she'd been trying to figure out how to tell me, that she'd hoped we could work through it, that she'd been so confused and scared. The lies kept unraveling. She'd never actually ended things with the married colleague. He hadn't blocked her number or transferred departments. In fact, he'd been pressuring her to get an abortion and leave me. Mom, God love her, looked at me across that dinner table and said, "Well, this explains why you missed your father's funeral. You were already living in a fantasy." It hit like a sledgehammer. All those years of telling myself my marriage was solid, that my sacrifices meant something, that I was being noble and responsible. I'd been the only one not in on the joke. The only one still believing in something that had died years ago. I asked Sarah to leave, not forever, not dramatically, just for the weekend while Mom was here. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. She packed a bag without argument and went to stay with her sister. Saturday morning, Mom and I sat in the garden with coffee, and she told me about Dad's last days. How he'd asked for me repeatedly, how he'd saved all my old school papers and the first few pages of that novel I never finished. How he'd been proud of me even though I'd chosen a path he didn't understand. "Your father was dying," Mom said quietly, "and you were dying too, just more slowly." That afternoon, James came home from rugby practice to find his grandmother and me going through old photo albums. Pictures of Sarah and me from our early years, when we actually looked happy. James sat down with us, and for the first time ever, I told him the truth about everything. Not the sordid details, but the important parts. That his mother and I had lost our way, that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, that none of it was his fault. He took it better than I expected. Maybe he'd already sensed something was wrong. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. Sunday came and went without word from Sarah. Monday too. I was starting to worry when she finally called Tuesday evening. Her voice was strange, hollow. She'd been to see a lawyer. She wanted a divorce, and she wanted it quick and clean. No fighting over assets, no drawn-out custody battles. She'd keep the house, I'd keep my savings, and we'd share custody of James. The baby wasn't mentioned. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like I was watching someone else's life fall apart from a great distance. We met at a coffee shop yesterday to sign the preliminary papers. Sarah looked different. Cleaner, somehow. Like she'd been carrying a massive weight and had finally set it down. I should have left years ago, she said as we sat there with our mediator. We should have left each other years ago. We were both just too scared. She's right, of course. We'd been playing house with the corpse of our relationship for so long that we'd forgotten what it felt like to be alive. The strangest part? I'm not angry anymore. I'm not numb either. I'm something I haven't been in decades, curious about what comes next, about who I am when I'm not playing the role of devoted husband to someone who checked out years ago. James is handling it all with the resilience that kids somehow manage to summon. He asked if this meant he'd have 2 Christmases now, and when I said probably, he grinned and asked if that meant 2 sets of presents too. Mom flew back to London yesterday, but not before giving me a lecture about not wasting any more time feeling sorry for myself. You're 46, she said at the airport. That's young enough to start over and old enough to do it right this time. I start my new schedule at work next week, 3 days in the office, 2 days working from home. It'll mean another pay cut, but for the first time in my adult life, money doesn't feel like the most important thing. I found those novel pages again last night. They're terrible, absolutely terrible, but there's something in them that I'd forgotten about. Hope, maybe, or just the memory of what it felt like to believe in something bigger than myself. I'm not going to finish that book. But I might start a new one. The house feels empty now, but not in a bad way. It feels like it's waiting for something. Or someone. Maybe that's just me projecting, but I don't think so. James and I are going to Melbourne next weekend. Just the 2 of us, no agenda, no schedule. He wants to see the Science Museum, and I want to see what it feels like to be spontaneous again. I have no idea what I'm doing, and for the first time in years, that doesn't terrify me. It excites me. Update 3. I'm back, and I wish I could say things have gotten simpler, but life apparently has other plans. The Melbourne trip with James turned into something I never saw coming, and I'm still trying to process what it all means. We drove down on Friday afternoon, just the 2 of us in my old sedan with a playlist James had made, half his music, half mine. For the first time in years, we actually talked during a car ride instead of sitting in comfortable silence. He told me about this girl at school, Emma, who he's been too nervous to ask to the year-end formal. I found myself giving him dating advice, which felt surreal considering my recent track record. The Science Museum was incredible. James dragged me through every exhibit, explaining things with the kind of enthusiasm I'd forgotten he had. Watching him light up talking about black holes and particle physics, I realized how much I'd missed. Not just the big moments, but the small ones, the way he thinks, his sense of humor, his genuine curiosity about everything. Saturday night, we were having dinner at this little Italian place near our hotel when James got quiet. Really quiet. Finally, he looked up from his pasta and asked, "Dad, do you think Mom's baby is mine?" The question hit me like a brick. What do you mean, James? I mean, will it be my brother or sister? Or just someone else's kid who happens to live in our old house? I didn't have an answer. The honest truth is, I'd been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't really thought about how this was affecting him. Here was my 17-year-old son, trying to figure out if he was about to become a big brother or just a bystander in his mother's new life. Whatever happens, I told him, you're my son, and nothing will ever change that. He nodded, but I could see it wasn't really enough. How could it be? Sunday morning, everything changed. We were checking out of the hotel when my phone rang. Sarah's sister, Jen. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. Sarah had been in an accident. The drive back to Sydney was a blur. James sat beside me, unusually quiet, while I tried to piece together what Jen had told me. Sarah had been driving to her lawyer's office Saturday morning when another car ran a red light and slammed into her passenger side. She was alive, but unconscious. The baby. They weren't sure about the baby. I know I should have felt something clear, anger, concern, vindication, something. Instead, I felt that familiar numbness creeping back in, mixed with something I didn't expect, genuine worry. Not for our relationship, not for our future, but for her, for the woman I'd spent 20 years with, even if most of them had been a lie. At the hospital, everything was chaos. Jen was there, Sarah's parents had flown in from Perth, and there was this man I didn't recognize sitting in the corner of the waiting room. Tall, well-dressed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jen introduced him as Marcus. The married colleague. Sarah's latest affair partner. The possible father of her unborn child. The situation was so absurd I almost laughed. Here we were, Sarah's current husband and her married lover, sitting in the same waiting room, both worried about the same unconscious woman and her baby that could belong to either of us. Or neither of us, for all we knew. Marcus looked miserable. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light every time he shifted in his chair, and I could see him checking his phone constantly, probably texts from his wife wondering where he was. She told me she was getting divorced, he said quietly after we'd been sitting there for an hour. Said it was just a matter of paperwork. She told me she'd ended things with you, I replied. We looked at each other across that sterile waiting room, two men who'd been played by the same woman in different ways. The doctor came out around midnight. Sarah was stable, conscious, but had suffered a serious concussion and some internal bleeding. The baby was alive, but they were monitoring closely for signs of distress. No visitors except immediate family for now. Marcus stood up, hesitated, then walked out without a word. I haven't seen him since. Sarah's been awake for 3 days now, but she's different. The concussion has affected her short-term memory. She remembers our early years together clearly, remembers James as a little boy, but the last 5 years are patchy. She doesn't remember the affairs, doesn't remember asking for a divorce, doesn't remember much of anything about why I'm sleeping in the guest room at her sister's place instead of beside her hospital bed. The doctors say the memory issues might be temporary, or they might be permanent. There's no way to know yet. Yesterday, she asked me why I looked so sad, why everyone was being so careful around her. She wanted to know if we'd had a fight about something. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone they've destroyed your marriage when they don't remember doing it? How do you explain to your wife that she's pregnant with another man's baby when she can't even remember there was another man? James has been incredible through all of this. He sits with his mother every day after school, helping her remember things, showing her photos on his phone, being patient when she asks the same questions over and over. But I can see the toll it's taking on him. This morning, he asked me if we were going to pretend to be a happy family again now that mom can't remember why we weren't. I told him we'd figure it out as we go. Sarah's sister thinks this is some kind of cosmic second chance, that maybe we can start fresh now that Sarah doesn't remember the affairs. Her parents agree, they keep talking about how much Sarah loved me in the early days, how maybe this accident was meant to bring us back together. But I remember 10 years of lies, of feeling like I was married to a stranger, of missing my father's funeral for a life that wasn't even real. A head injury doesn't erase those years. It doesn't undo the damage or rebuild the trust. The baby is still growing, still healthy according to the latest ultrasound. Sarah talks about names sometimes, asks if we're excited, assumes I'm the father because in her fractured memory, of course I would be. I don't know what to do with any of this. I don't know if I'm supposed to be Sarah's husband again because she can't remember why I stopped being one. I don't know if I'm supposed to raise another man's child because my wife can't remember conceiving it with someone else. What I do know is that James needs stability, and Sarah needs care, and somehow I seem to be the only one in position to provide both. The divorce papers are sitting unsigned in my lawyer's office. Sarah's memory might come back tomorrow, or next month, or never. The baby will be born in 5 months, and we still don't know who the father is. I'm 46 years old, and I feel like I'm starting my life over again, but I'm not sure it's by choice this time. Maybe that's what second chances really look like, not the clean slate you want, but the messy reality you have to work with. Melbourne feels like it happened to someone else, but James still talks about the Science Museum, still brings up that conversation about Emma from school. Yesterday, he asked her to the formal. She said yes. At least someone in this family knows what they want.